Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Hey everyone, we're back for part 2 of a conversation with Kristen Jenson, the author of Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, and her newest version of this book, The Guide for Girls. We will continue the discussion on why does this conversation need to happen for girls? How is that unique? What does this look like for young people and specifically young women dealing with a conversation about pornography? And then how do we address this from hope? She'll talk a little bit about her heart behind it and then what we are seeing. I hope that this is an encouraging, equipping conversation. With no further ado, let's jump on in. Kind of put a bow on that portion of the conversation. We talk about the key messages, the good pictures, the bad pictures, the way we go about equipping them to be present in a difficult situation and to help put the brakes on. How does this book work, I guess, from the hope focus rather than from fear? We're not playing whack-a-mole. Like, you do a very nice job of not like, it's big, it's scary, so never look at it, because inevitably a kid's like, all right, I lived through it. Like, do I just not tell anyone and pretend it didn't happen? Like, how do you go about empowering rather than fear-mongering in this conversation?
Yeah. Well, I think we just talk about how it affects the brain and how it can become, we do talk about how it can become a bad habit or an addiction. And I feel like kids really enjoy that. They really like that. They like learning about their brain. So we talk about the thinking brain and the feeling brain. And so I don't know, that just seems to work because it's just very matter of fact. And it doesn't shame the child. Like, I would say, hey, if you've got a robot child, just adjust the program, right? But if you've got a biological child, they're going to be curious. And the only way you're going to help them control that curiosity is by creating this internal filter, this disposition, and persuading them. And, it's just really, really important that we teach children that, and they're not caught off guard. So I love in the girls' book, like you said, we talk about the different, I was in Target. Okay. I was in Target. Somebody actually wrote me about this. And they're like, we found these books in Target. And they looked like the cute little country, little story, like a Hallmark story in a book.
Yeah.
And they showed, and then they actually showed the thing, and they sent us these screenshots. So I went to my local Target. Oh, lo and behold, there it was. It was like, some romance that happened in the fall, and it showed this really pretty little farm with pumpkins and whatever. Okay. It looked so quaint, and oh my gosh, I turned it open. I actually looked at the screenshot and I'm like, oh my gosh. And right there at the end cap, at the checkout line, there it was.
Wow.
And porn, just absolute, very explicit sexual descriptions. So if it's there in Target, at the end cap, like, where else is it going to be? It's just going to be in a lot of
school library, your friend's
Yeah.
house, like, it's going to be everywhere. That is
so
wild.
So talking about, I know. I think I've seen everything, but every once in a while, I'm shocked. But like you were talking about how, we need to kind of like make this not scary and not shaming. And what I love about these books is that they show the parent in this very proactive role, and they model that. So it just feels normal. It just feels like, oh, this is like one more conversation my parent is having with me about the world that we're growing up in and the beauties of it, but also some of the problems that I can avoid. Yeah. And we do this with all kinds of other things. And we need to do it with pornography as well, because as I mentioned earlier, it is the number one grooming tool. And I have so many stories of kids who were able to, somebody showing them pornography, get out of there and tell a parent, and be saved from a very unsafe situation. So it's just, there's just not many downsides. I really just don't see that there are many downsides to empowering your children, giving them tools and giving them the ability to come and talk with you about not only like that they saw something, but like how it made them feel, because it can be both exciting and sickening at the same time.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, any of the research that actually interviews young people, you get both, right? They're like, well, I'm curious and I like how I feel when it's happening, but I also hate what I just viewed and I don't like what it's doing to me. And like we see time and time again, anytime young viewers are reflecting on it, like we see both, which let's take that then. Let's say we're the other kid on the bus, the kid who hadn't yet had the conversation. Does this work for that child? Like that, I already saw it. I was intrigued. I
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
look away and tell an adult. I'm the two girls on the front lawn who 3 months later, like, does
Yeah.
this work for that kid?
Yeah. Sure, because now they can put in context their experience.
Yeah.
We have a lot of experiences that we don't understand. And then at some point, we learn something and we're like, oh, okay, now I'm going to do that better. Right. I mean, all
Sure.
of us do that. I'm still doing that in my age.
It is.
So I think that there's never a time when you can't give your kids a defense against pornography, even
Mm.
if they've kind of been pulled into it. Um, that's why, we used to be protect young minds and we changed it to defend young minds, because when you say defend, there's a known enemy. And we just love that word. And we need to give our kids digital defense skills,
Yeah.
because we're never going to be able to, like you just said with the Peloton. I'm like, and feature creep with these apps.
Yeah.
You get an app and you say, okay, I think you can use it. And then, unbeknownst to you, they change the features.
Yeah.
And
Now it has a
now
relational
other
AI
people
pinned
can
to the top.
chat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Like,
Or people
oh,
can talk to them through the
yep.
app. Perfect strangers. So
Yeah.
these are things that it's very difficult to keep up on. But if you have regular talks
Mm.
with your children about technology, like you are teaching, that is so empowering for children. And I just want to touch on, there was some research that showed that college kids whose parents had talked to them about pornography were much less likely to be involved with it than those who their parent never broached the topic.
Mm.
And the other thing I wanted to mention was I gave a couple of years ago, actually, I gave a presentation at a national, what was a global summit on sexual exploitation. And I talked about all the research now that's coming out that shows that pornography really hurts a child's and an adult's mental health, and just increased incidence of depression, anxiety, all kinds of issues, and even suicides. So if we want to protect our children's mental health, we also want to give them a defense against pornography.
I love that. So we are talking about something that not only we know is incredibly relevant for parents and grandparents and caregivers of young people, but is pertinent to those children, both in their development and then their long-term mental and physical well-being. So at the end of, or I guess processing through the conversation with Guide for Girls on Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, you talk about the can-do process. Would you speak to that just a minute, for just a moment, and talk about what that does to empower girls to actually enact these lessons, whether they've seen it already or this is a purely preventative relational measure? What does the can-do do for these young women?
Yeah. Well, it takes some of the shame out of it. First of all, girls, I'll tell you, girls feel more shame when they're interested in these things, because culturally we have this myth that girls are not supposed to be interested in sex.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, when I was a teenager, I got that message too. And I was like, something's wrong with me, because I am interested. Luckily I didn't have a lot of resources to look at pornography, but and then girls, so they have more shame. So this helps to lower the shame, because 44%, according to a Barna study, 44% of women in the United States consume pornography or report that they consume that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because the other thing that the studies show is that girls bear the brunt, women bear the brunt of actually the really negative consequences. So girls with the self-esteem, the body issues, the can-do plan just gives them an action plan. It helps them know the first three, help them know what to do immediately upon being exposed. And then the second part of the do part is really what to do when those images and memories pop up, and how to create a neural pathway away from those images. And you know what, Nathan, it works not only for pornography, but for any kind of disturbing or upsetting content that they may read about or witness. And so the can-do plan really is the final piece of the whole book. It's hard to take it just alone, but it builds a plan, a protective plan for children, and it works for adults as well. And so adults in recovery can also use this plan, and it's all just very helpful and based on research.
Yeah. And I love that, because it is like, especially so our audience is Christians, we're thinking like, oh, well, I've been made new, so like this shouldn't be a problem for me anymore. And folks, like, yeah, you got a new spirit, but your body's still broken. Like you've got some ruts from habits in the past. And I think letting our kids know that too, like, yes, that's why we're concerned about this. Like, read any of the books, Dopamine Nation, or The Brain That Changes Itself, or like any book that talks about addiction. And then it will always come to sex and pornography at some point. And they're like, yeah, like you can be free from these old ways. You don't have to do it, but you also are more sensitive to it. And that idea, just the do part of like, how do we reset our brain and refocus our attention deliberately as an active choice? We can't stop ourselves from reacting to the trigger, but we can stop ourselves from acting on it. Parents, as we strive to raise kids who love God and use tech, it's intimidating to look at this next stage of life and think about what academics may look like for them. When you're thinking about college, consider George Fox University for your children because of three things. First, it's going to give you a more intimate, known environment where they have a focus on being known personally, academically, and spiritually. Your child will grow in their faith. 93% of undergrad students at George Fox last year, through the 2025 academic year, said that being at George Fox has helped them grow in their relationship with Jesus. We also want them to grow academically, which means being a part of a university with rigorous academic standards and opportunities to be engaged. They have a nationally recognized engineering, nursing, and education programs, as well as chances to study abroad here within the U.S. and then internationally. And finally, personally, to be part of a vibrant campus atmosphere where you can play intramural sports or part of their NCAA Division III athletic programs with 23 sports available. The goal here is to go to a place that's going to support your goals, not try to make you support theirs. To have that goal be to raise you up to be all God's called you to be, and to truly equip your young person with in my case, my sons or my daughter, to love God, and then from their love of God to go wherever God has called them. And that includes being equipped with a degree that'll help them do that, to be missionally equipped to love and serve others, to lead where God has planted them, and to know the gospel for themselves, to be able to share it with others. So George Fox University is an amazing resource for our kids, for our community here in the Northwest, and for anyone who's looking to raise up a young person who can love God and from that, love others. To kind of close this conversation then, Kristen, and again, we're talking to Kristen Jenson, author of Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, A Guide for Girls, just came out this year in 2026. In closing notes, I just want to kind of reflect on the girl aspect of this conversation. You mentioned why it's specifically for girls, what there is unique about both their struggle with it socially, the shame that comes up with both viewing it and discussing it, and then the way they bear the brunt of most of the negative parts of what pornography does culturally and personally. How can we, if we're to put this conversation in a nutshell, what can we do as parents or as caregivers, as loving mentors or adults, teachers? What can we do to support young women in this conversation about good pictures, bad pictures, and their place in a digital society?
Yeah. We can realize that girls are not born with an immunity to curiosity about sexual things. We just jettison that idea. Okay. We can prepare them, talk to them, and help them understand that we care because they can be more vulnerable than boys, even because nobody thinks to put any filters on the phone, and they give them social media when they're 12 and all these things, or even younger. Oh, so, and there's just so much porn in social media. So, I think that for girls, as we talk to them, they're going to grow up more confident. They're going to grow up safer, smarter, and more confident, because they will have seen what pornography teaches, the negative toxic messages that it teaches girls about who they are. A woman is more than her body, right? She is just like every other human. She has her personality, her talents, her character. These are just as important or more important than her outside appearance. Now, I'm not saying girls shouldn't try to look pretty. I mean, I got makeup on today, right? I got earrings on. I'm trying to look as best I can. But that's if that's all I worried about. And there's studies that show that girls that just really focus on their appearance actually, they have their development is delayed in other aspects. Like their normal childhood development is delayed in a lot of other like non-sexual things that kids need to learn, when they're so focused on their appearance and their hotness and whatever. So it's really important for their development that we have these conversations with them, and to be like, we understand that this can be hard, and girls get into pornography often differently than boys. They get in through the stories because girls love stories about relationships. Young adult books are just filled with, unfortunately, with some explicit material. I have a friend that is a writer, and she writes young adult fiction, and she wrote a book, and the publisher, she was published by a mainstream publisher, said, we got to get more sex in this book.
Ooh.
And she's like, no, we don't. And she really had to give pushback to say, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not necessary. So really got to be careful. I once saw a book that my daughter had brought home from high school. I think she was maybe in the 10th grade, right? And she brought a book from the high school library, and it was a sci-fi book. She's like super scientist gal and really into sci-fi. But I looked at the back of the book, and it said something about erotic. And I'm like, oh, and I said,
Oh.
and so I wasn't like, you cannot read this book. Let me take this book. I'm throwing it in the garbage.
Right.
No, I just said, and so I just had a conversation with her about it.
Yeah.
And I said, I want you to consider maybe not finishing this book. And she goes, oh, but the plot or the this or the that.
Yeah.
But ultimately she made the right decision. But I didn't at that age, what do you really need to just persuade them. And, but I remember even like books for younger kids, so you really kind of have to be careful about what they're reading. But girls, if they can see the toxic messages, not only about their bodies, but how they're objectified and how they learn to objectify not only other people, but themselves when they look at pornography, because it's a very powerful teaching tool. Yeah. And so I think with girls, we're just loving them. We're just giving them what they need to survive with their mental health intact, in this digital world.
Well, thank you for making these resources so we can be a part of that journey of raising these young people to see just how valuable they are and to see what a healthy life
Yes.
versus an unhealthy life looks like. Thank you again, Kristen. So again, this is Kristen Jenson, author of Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, A Guide for Girls. Kristen, where else can people find your resources? We're going to put links in the show notes, but where else can people
Yeah.
find them if they're going and looking on their own?
Yeah. So defendyoungminds.com has free guides to download, articles that we, to keep current with everything that's happening out there. And I'm sure you also do that. Um, and then our social media. So please follow us on Instagram and Facebook, Defend Young Minds. And we put out a lot of great content. We do collaborations with other parenting influencers and also, experts, law enforcement, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, follow us on our Instagram and Facebook. We're also on X and others, but like those are our two main ones. And we really, I don't know, that's just our outreach. I want to give back. I want to hold a parent's hand a little bit. I want to give them some specific tools that will really help them begin these conversations. Like the book itself is not going to do all the,
Right.
it gets you started.
Yeah,
It
it does.
gives your kids the vocabulary and the words and the understanding of how the brain works.
Yeah.
So I'm just so grateful to be able to do this work.
Well, that's amazing. And everyone, obviously, the book is available through Amazon, or you can go to
Yeah.
defendyoungminds.com and check that out as well. Thank you again for being here with us, Kristen. Thank you all for being a part of this conversation. If it was helpful for you, would you go ahead and share it with a friend? Would you help others learn about this conversation so that they can hear about resources that people are making that help us equip young people and families to use the best tech well, to love God, and from that love of God to use tech? What this does is it opens the conversation and allows our children to say, yes, here's where I have struggled or where I've been harmed, and here is where these conversations have prepared me or will prepare me in the future if I hadn't heard yet. There's no child who's too far gone. There's no parent who's been so bad that this isn't a worthwhile conversation in having. So please do begin having those conversations in love and in hope. And I hope this equips you to do what you want to do well, which is parent and to raise your kids up in the way they should go. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me, Nathan@gospeltech.net. You can find our resources on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Love God, Use Tech. And you can join us next week as we continue this conversation about how we can love God and use tech.